anyone who has questions. I don't know how to actually do that in a sense where it's more orderly, where people aren't talking over one another.
Mm.
So, but maybe just to start, if anyone has a question right off, whoever speaks up first, then we just start from there. Okay. All right. Okay. All right, then I'll start my spiel. I perceive, and most of you know that I do a lot of talking during the sessions, and my perception of gender is just basically very simple. We're all consciousness first before we become anything else. So before I am considered a masculine or a male, I was consciousness first. So what I am and how I chose to express myself, whether I chose to express myself or just found myself in this, situation, it always comes second. I have to perceive everything as a consciousness, therefore I can respect all the other consciousness, regardless as to what their expressions are. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I was kind of expecting a few questions so I could get rolling in a certain way, but you had a number of questions that you, topics.
I guess maybe sharing some of the biggest struggles that you've seen women in your life struggle with, and how you encourage them to deal with it, or how they dealt with it, and how you see it perceived.
Well, I really, in a sense, I would really prefer that the participants actually, tell me what they feel they're struggling, what you guys feel that you're struggling with. And, I've obviously heard the obvious having to do with relationships and things like that. And most of you probably know my take on that relationships are pretty much designed to be not that easy. And I've dealt with a number of individuals who talk about, oh, wow, I just got distracted.
Who talk about what?
Well, I just lost my train of thought. Sorry.
When you were talking about, like, for example, one of the struggles that I had was just appreciating being a woman in this kind of realm. Like, all my life, I thought, man, if I could be a guy, this would be awesome. But being a woman, and you taught me to appreciate being a woman.
Yeah, well, it was more of me teaching you how to appreciate being a consciousness.
Yeah.
Literally. So there are times that someone, I think you've said that, oh, you're a really, good man, and I said I prefer to be considered a good consciousness. So in that sense, it's like, it's sort of tearing down walls, which I know it's not that easy. It's easier said than done. Yeah, it's easier said than done. This is a situation. This is a system that's been set up with lots of doors and lots of walls and lots of rooms. So everything is compartmentalized this way and so on and so forth. This is a man, this is a woman, this is, rich, this is poor, this is smart, this is dumb, when in reality, everything is intermingling with everything else. I have to say that I think what we're going to do, when you were talking about as far as like your struggle as a feminine, as a woman, I would kind of like to hear someone actually speak up and really just kind of like pitch in, someone help me out here, basically what I'm saying, so I can get things rolling. Because it's easier if I get primed, then I can roll more fluently.
Okay. Well, Miss J has a question.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can go.
Okay, terrific.
Well, I was just so one thing that I've been exploring is like
and things in the background.
It's probably my neighborhood. I can close my windows. I will close my windows. Sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Go ahead with your question.
Sure. Yeah. So I feel like lately, I've been looking at programming. For the longest time, I had the idea like I had to, have a baby, and then I had to have a husband before I had a baby, and like this drilling of programming, and then now looking at it. So how to kind of like navigate all the programs are put on for females.
Okay.
How to navigate.
That's a very good question, which, get asked,
Quite often.
yeah, quite often. Again, I'm just basically stressing looking at yourself beyond the programming, beyond being a female, and seeing, let's say, you see yourself just basically as a consciousness in the universe. So with, none of this stuff, none of these experiences, and as a consciousness in the universe, how would you perceive yourself if you can actually, put your head there? How can you perceive yourself? And how would you perceive yourself? So for me, for instance, as a consciousness in the universe, I feel that I'm literally come in with many possibilities, and not, gender-wise, just as far as the consciousness and expanding, exploring, and experiencing. So when I look at it that way, and then I look at who I am now, or let's say my vehicle or my avatar is really what I like to call, my body, my avatar. I see this as a vehicle that is also of consciousness, but I see this as a vehicle that I'm using to facilitate an expression. So as far as, what I do, I don't really subscribe to any programs. So one of the things that I had to deal with when I was younger, from my late teens into my 20s or in mid 30s, were programming by other men. Like, I'm driving through the turnpike. You stop at the toll booth, and the guy, behind us says, "What's the score with the game today?" Just assuming that I'm watching the game, or I'm listening to the game because I'm a dude. And I would just say, well, I really don't care, man. I don't follow the sports. He said, well, you're a tall guy, you look athletic. What the hell is the problem? So I've dealt with that, and I got very comfortable with it. As I think really what it was, I just got really pissed off with the programming or the assumption that you're over 6 feet tall, you're supposed to be playing basketball. Also you're 6 feet tall and you're black guy, you're supposed to be playing basketball. So I don't like people putting me into slots. The thing that freed me up so that I can do what I do is the fact that I just knocked down all the walls and decided I would deal with the world in the way that I decide to deal with it. So in a sense, I don't really, I'm not here to defend anyone in the sense as far as gender is concerned. I'd like to be just an observer and not really, and someone say, well, that's kind of hard, you're a dude, but it's not that hard for me.
A neutral party?
Just a neutral party.
I have a kind of similar perspective for me with what your story. I remember growing up, because I was more masculine energy than feminine. I remember my mom, oh, you can't go outside and play with the boys, or you have to wear skirts. You can't sit with your legs open. And I feel like the subconscious programming starts from that. But because my mother was programmed by her mother, and it's just the whole quote unquote tradition of things. And I always knew for me that none of that ever resonated to me. I never felt like I could be boxed into anything. So I feel like it starts at a young age only because we've been programmed to continuously teach the same nonsense over and over and over.
Yeah, very good, absolutely. And for me, right now we're talking very level 1 type of deal. I call level 1 is just what, in other words, my experience when I learned how to, I asked my mom to teach me how to when I was maybe about 16. And, she said, fine. My father comes in from work and he looks at me at the stove. He asks me, what am I doing? And I'm saying, well, I'm cooking, And he immediately says, that's woman's work.
Yeah. My mom used to say, you have to clean your dad and your brother's dishes. And I'm like, no, I don't.
Well, with my father just said, look, I said, I have no plans of just going, just getting married right out of the house, which means I'm going to have to know how to feed myself. So I don't have to run out, try to find and, you know, some random woman to get married to so that she can cook for me. I said, I would like to be able to, you know, to feed myself. I have no plans of getting married before 30, actually, is what I did tell her. I said, I have no plans of getting married before 30, which, you know, his eyebrows went up to that also. But I did get, you know, I mean, you had to work with him. He's pretty tough taskmaster. But one day we came home. My mom was visiting my grandma. No women around to cook. So he looks at me and he says, you know how to make some biscuits? And I looked it up, you know, and never heard anything from him again after that. So,
Survival.
so you know, so a lot of you have heard that I talk about things from the other side that basically dictate what goes on in this realm. And when I was younger and speaking about it, you know, a lot of people would think, well, you know, I don't know, what is this other side you're talking about? Who are these people or these things on the other side that control things on this side? And at the time, I was just experiencing things, you know, on the mystical level. If you read the book, you know, you probably know some of the stories that I've had experience with these things before I really understood what they were. But I do know that someone always benefits from something that's either going wrong in this world, and not very much goes right for most people in this world. But things that are problematic, something and someone is generally benefiting from it. So even in the sense of how this, you know, certain governments will wage war against some other group and so on and so forth, and then they give you their spiel as to why you should, you know, join the military because you're going to defend, you know, whatever nonsense that are basically lies, because somebody's feeding off of all of that. You know, if you look at level one, you know, I used to read all this stuff, you know, conspiracy stuff and whatever. And most conspiracies aren't really conspiracies. They're really stuff that's going on, really. But someone was making a lot of money for, you know, starting wars in places. I worked for bomb companies who liked it when countries got overturned or overthrown, excuse me, because then they get to print new money for, you know, for each government every time it gets overthrown. So there are individuals behind the scenes overthrowing countries, basically, you know, for the money. But if you go deeper, there are things that I call such, you know, which is not my original term, is such as loosh. So having to do with being locked into a box as a female and having all these, all these trials and tribulations around it, and having someone, you know, you like I said, when you're a little kid, your mother, she was programmed, her mother was programmed, you know, from who knows how long, but programmed to stay in a certain box. And, you know, some of the things were, you know, also this happily ever after stuff that never, ever, ever happened. And I know that the majority are mature enough to know that that's a bunch of nonsense. Or watching movies and, you know, in cartoons or whatever, where some young woman, she's a victim and she gets put to sleep, and then some dude has to come around and, you know, give her a kiss and the magic and, you know, all of that, so that she can't see that some dude, some guy comes into the picture.
Yeah, I feel like they programmed women to like be more emotional and men more logical, and that's what's kind of like over time has had the female feel more weakened, like that their job is just to cater and to raise babies and to just be, you know, just shut down by the male ego. And I just feel like women are essentially a lot more logical than men are sometimes.
A lot of times, especially before they get involved with men. I have 5 sisters. Well, 4 now, but I had, you know, 5 sisters, and I saw the logic. And I'm the second oldest of 7 children, and my oldest sister, you know, she was kind of my hero for a while when I was a kid, because, you know, she was, you know, we were both like, we weren't very tall, we were pretty short. I was the shortest kid in my class all the way until I was in the 11th grade. And the kid that was shorter than me, he had some kind of physical ailment. That's why he was, you know, I ended up being taller than him. But she was kind of my father's favorite. And so there was this thing with her being my father's favorite. I think he kind of let her be more masculine in a certain way. And we grew up a good, let's say maybe half of our life on a farm where, I did do a lot more heavy duty work, but when it came to feeding livestock, we had these 5-gallon buckets, we had to have one in one hand and one in the other just to keep our balance. And we had to all go out there and feed livestock, the boys as well as the girls. And we carried as much weight as well. So it's also, it has to do, obviously, like I said, with programming and who's buying the program. Like I said, my father, he favored her, so he kind of got into her being, rough and tumble. He liked the fact that if some boy harassed her, she picked up a brick and hit him in the head with it. So maybe that was just kind of, whoa, if I do that, I don't know, him and his friends may come back on me, but she didn't care. So when she got to the point where she decided to buy into wanting to get married and having a kid, not having a kid because she didn't have any children, but getting married, I saw a shift in her when they were pushing her because she was in her mid-20s that, oh, you should have someone, you should get married or whatever, or or someone who has money who can take care of you and all that. And I saw her change how she interacted with men, which was literally a disappointment to me because all of a sudden, someone who was very, very tough and very strong, I thought, as a female, she just basically subjugated herself to this individual who I really couldn't stand anyway. But she subjugated herself just to basically fit into a program. So the reality is that you really don't have to subjugate yourself. If you are a movement of your own, where you're just looking at yourself as a consciousness who is expressing yourself as a feminine, as a female, which means you have the right as a consciousness to express yourself in any way you want to express yourself as a female. Just as I have the right to express myself in any way I want to express myself as a male. And in the beginning, there's going to be some individuals who want to challenge you. But in the end, they obviously must have lives to live, and they'll eventually leave you alone. So
I remember you said something about how would you live your life if other men didn't have any impact in the way you perceive how you would live it. Like they have no influence in how would you live your life if they didn't exist. And I thought, a lot of people, that's mostly what they do each day. They even dress up because they want the guys to see them.
Mm-hmm.
They wear certain makeup because they want some dude to see them. But what if they didn't exist? How would you behave?
would you feel inclined? I've talked to women who are very confused about that, I'm dressing because I feel pretty, but who are you feeling pretty for?
Mm-hmm.
Most styles, if you read any of the history, that all these very uncomfortable styles, that including stiletto heels and brassieres and all this stuff, were invented by Western men.
Mm-hmm.
So in reality, women have not been in control of how they express themselves on this planet. And again, when you're a child and you have them beating this into your head as a kid, it is kind of hard to actually just, separate yourself from it and, start to express yourself. And, there's always exceptions, of what Neo Shamanic is one of them. She expresses herself in the way she chooses to express herself. And she doesn't need my full support for that, but I give her full support for expressing herself the way she wants to express herself. Just as any of you, I would give you my full support, coming from the other side or whatever, to express yourself in the way that you want to express yourself. It doesn't make me feel insecure if you are more, as a man, if you are able to take care of yourself even in a much more effective way than I can take care of myself. But the whole thing about kids and so on, and I raised two, and that stuff's not easy, man. I talk to, like I said, I got all these sisters, so I kind of talk to them about that whole thing, and some, like, I'm not really interested in it. And at the time, I didn't have kids, but I still felt that that's their right to not have them. That's their right to not follow somebody else's program. And if you really look at it, the programming is just totally insane anyway.
It is.
You know, one group is allowed this, another group is denied this, and so on and so forth. But they're trying to run the same program.
Mm-hmm.
You know, have kids when you can't afford to have kids. Certain individuals. You know, or some fantasy that you should have kids when you're not prepared to have them.
At a certain age.
Yeah, by a certain age. You know, if you get to 30 and you don't have a kid, it's, there's all this physical stuff that's, that's going to happen, and the kid won't be, healthy, and so on and so forth. Like when my wife
you're naturally looked at like, what's wrong with you? Why haven't you had any kids yet?
Yeah.
It's like you fall into the same cycle over and over and over.
Yeah. So in the end, and I have a cousin who fits that bill also, and she worked, for the airlines for decades, and very, very attractive woman, but she was traveling the world and she was enjoying it. And her mother was harassing her about getting married, but she stood her ground too. There are always and always have been women who will stand their ground as to what they decide they want to do. I think maybe now is actually a much better time for females to actually do what they want to do, and later for whatever this program is. That includes, you got to have a guy involved in your life in order for your life to be full.
Yeah.
Any input?
One more program that I feel like has been coming up for me is like money, and I was thinking about how much sploosh that creates. Like, so if someone doesn't have money, they might be like thinking about how are they going to get money. And if someone has a lot of it, then they think that there's loosh around, how am I going to keep it? And so this has been created to like, create so much of this energy. And I, want, like, logically, I'm like, okay, I do need it. It seems like at this point in this realm, but how do I get out of that mindset?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. It took me a long time to actually deal with that one, because it came up modest. We didn't have a whole lot, but I have to admit, when I was living in New York and I was in the business of illustration and design, I was struggling with that. Everything is almost as though the more I worried about money, the harder it was for it to come.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, I just felt like, you know what, if I'm going to crash and burn, because I had bought a house, and they call house poor and all that. I said, if I'm going to crash and burn, I'm just going to crash and burn finally. And I just said, I'm not going to worry about it. And I ended up taking my kids, family on a trip, to the West Indies, and put it on the credit card and all this stuff. And I just didn't care after that. I just like, I'm just, that's just, I'm going to enjoy myself. I promised my kids I was going to take them out of the country and all this stuff, and I did. And when I came back, I still had that attitude, like, if I'm going to crash and burn, I'm going to crash and burn. Some of the programming for men is, if you crash and burn, man, you've let down your family, your kids, and all this other stuff. But I had just had enough of it. And when I came back, all of a sudden, business started coming in, because I wasn't putting up this wall of nervousness that was literally, I felt, was blocking, the finances and the resources. And from that point on, I never had any issues with the resources. So that's just one story. It's an antidote. I would say that if you can really just try to target the whole, the whole nervousness around it, because it's all consciousness. Money is definitely something that's been created to cause those type of stresses. If anything, one of the problems I deal with sometimes is even when we're looking for a new location, because we need to have a better place than where we're at right now. A lot of it has to do with people's greed. out there when
Mm.
we're trying to make, deals where I do research and you find out certain things are worth, are going for this price in certain areas, and I go out and somebody's trying to get me to pay double for something I know is going to depreciate in about a year. To the point where they're so stubborn and so much greed here that you end up with this aggravation on that level. So you're trying to be the one who's like, I'm very calm about the whole money thing. When you go out in the world, it's like there's this whirlwind of nonsense going on, all about money, 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 money. So I don't know with Nellie, as far as in the States, when my daughter was there in September, she was saying that a lot of the conversation in the States had revolved around credit ratings and debt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad. Like I've struggled like for a while with the money thing, and I shared with you my tree theory that I came up with to kind of explain to people where what helped me is you helping me understand to view money as, like you said, it's energy, so it's consciousness as well. So I first detached people from it, where felt like I needed people to provide the money for me to, so then I went down to the source of what's the source of money. And for me, I'm like, okay, well, money's made out of paper. If you simplify it to that much, but then I'm like, okay, where does paper come from? It comes from trees. But the universe gave us trees for free, where it provides food, water, shelter, medicine. You can even get clothes from trees. Anything you need to survive is basically given to us for free. So why do we put so much stress on the money? Because the money comes from paper, which comes from trees. So instead of looking at money as a debt or like I need it, I just look at trees and I'm like, thank you for being here. Because as long as I see you, I'm able to have whatever it is that you're here to provide me with. And ever since I've done that, like I feel like I reprogrammed my outlook on money and I removed the energy from it. So I no longer feel like money has its own consciousness versus I'm open to receiving everything I need to survive in this earth because that's what was given to me already.
Right. So you're
People and their
seeing money
consciousness and the
primarily.
programming is what kept, it keeps you in that fear of I need more of it or the debt and all that stuff.
Yeah. And it's primarily a tool.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically a tool for something very dense to cause the kind of stress that people have over money. Even what Ms. J is saying, that, there's this stress around it because, there's always this, you need money, you need money, you need money. And at times, even if you have a certain amount of cash, some people fall into this thing where, they saved up a certain amount, but then there's someone saying that you need this thing to make you happy, which is some really obscure nonsense of like a new cell phone or something like that costs way too much money. But because of the programming is so thick all the way around, next thing you're spending money on something that you really don't need. And I've been around long enough to know when there was no credit cards.
Right.
So whatever we needed when I was growing up, we had to have the cash.
Even getting apartments in the States is like you have to do a background check, a this, a that, and provide on. It's like if you're making money and you have money, what's the problem?
Yeah. Or people that I've known who have a lot of money, they spend a whole lot of time with what Ms. J was saying, worrying that somebody's going to take their money.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
It's the
So
fear
you
of it
spend,
too, the energy.
Yeah. So it's like you're spending your whole life worried. Money's introduced on purpose. Its primary purpose is to create, as Ms. J was saying, a lot of loosh, which means a lot of negative energy, a lot of worry energy, a lot of fear energy.
Right.
And the reality of the matter is, if you, as Neo Shaman Nellie was saying, that she changed how she looked at it, and then it changed how money would flow in. So I remember when there were the talks about, who's the guy, Microsoft, Bill Gates or whatever. And there's, oh my goodness, Bill Gates, all this money. And there's this other guy that they've been talking about for the last 10 years. I keep forgetting his name because I think I do it on purpose. He's billionaire, and everyone looks to the billionaire, to show the way. When, to tell you the honest truth, and I know this for a fact, just from all the clients I've worked on, there are people who have contracts having to do with resources. And they don't necessarily have to be the brightest bulb in the pack. If they sign the contract, they make enough, douche for whatever's behind it, then they get a certain amount of money. I've known individuals who were like, $10 million, multimillionaires or whatever, who I would swear, how in the heck did this guy acquire this much resources with that stupidity? Because it has nothing to do with intelligence. Money has nothing to do with intelligence.
Nothing.
Right.
So there, I've had that when I was younger. Well, if you're so smart, how come you're not rich? And I always just scratch my head. I just have to walk away. What does that have to do with anything, Because again, I had known, people. I've been in, New York City business, and knew a lot of people who had a lot of cash. And I guarantee you that all of them had problems. Nobody was really happy. On top of that, also.
Yeah.
So I just look at it. These are tools that that are useful in a system that's been created that's based on finance. So I go out and I seek the tool in whatever way that I decide to seek the tool. I feel that I give something in return for it, in the sense so that I at least feel fair about someone sharing their resources. So that it's not like I feel, there's so many individuals who don't share anything and end up with a lot of resources. They basically will cheat. Well, the government does that all the time.
All the time.
They will cheat you out of your money, or, legally in America, taxes aren't supposed to be there because I think back when, Jefferson or one of these guys, taxes were just basically to boost some war that they were fighting. And then after the war was over, we weren't supposed to pay any taxes. Government is basically the mob. Wow, this is good, man. We can, why don't we keep this going? And then we invent things to ask for more money. We get all in people's business. Money, the monetary system is a real monster in this world. It really is.
And even tying back the money to like the women and men thing, like even nowadays, like women go after men based off of how much money they have. So it's like now it's like a jointed program, and it's so weird to watch.
Yeah, again, so they're both playing a part in the same program. So she feels, a lot of women will feel that they, and again, talking to a lot of women, having this number of sisters who were pretty candid about certain things, in their lives, we're having certain individuals, women who I consider, the enemy of other women, telling them that they had to, subscribe to something that really doesn't, it's not very dignified. Or sometimes it's very difficult, especially in certain cultures where the subjugation of the female is so heavy-handed that in order for them to actually expand and to actually grow on their own and do what they want to do, they have to actually leave that place, leave that country.
Wow.
So anyway,
I've seen also where in a relationship, the woman made more money than the man, and then they ended up divorcing because the guy felt too small about his worth or something.
That's so common.
Yeah.
Or they'll stay in a toxic situation just because they can't, the fear of making money outside of that relationship.
Right.
Yeah, I have a friend back before I moved here, and she had that situation. She worked in the fashion industry. She was like a not a supervisor, she was an executive, and her husband threw pots. So she made a lot of money. She's the one who's supporting it, supporting the family, and he was doing that house husband thing. And at first when I met him, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool that you can just be in that role and not have an issue. But of course, whenever you see someone for those moments, you don't really see, you really don't see them. You don't see what's going on when you're not around. And apparently he had issues around it and decided to be, start to have flings and things like that while she's out, working in the city. He's watching kids, but he's sleeping with the, the mother of the kid who's playing with his kid, that kind of thing. And I felt that for him was just kind of like a rebellion of sorts.
To make himself more masculine.
Yeah, make himself feel more manly, because the money thing messes with the men, messes with the heads of men also.
That's what's going on with my brother and his wife. She's a stay-at-home wife, and he's a firefighter. So he makes he makes her feel like she doesn't have a job, but he can't even handle one day doing what she does. So it's just funny to like.
Yeah. Well, my mom had 7 kids. But my father, he worked pretty much 7 days a week. So, but again, when his day was over, it was over. My mother's day was never over. So even when one of the stories about me supposedly putting coal in this stoker thing in the basement, my mother, she had to get up early, get him off, on the road, doing what he's doing, had to get us together, get us off to school, and then while we're in school, she's cleaning up the house, she's doing all this laundry and all this other kind of stuff. And she didn't just like stick with just doing things at women's stores. She would repair things also around the house. And then we come home. Then she had to deal with making dinner and so on and so forth. He come home shortly after. Dinner's ready. Then she's got to deal with us in our homework and what do you call policing us as far as like how much TV we're watching and all that kind of stuff. And then I didn't put the coal in the stoker. She had to come down there and do it for me. Actually dragging me down there with her at times to do it for me. So she never had a break. So even when and my father worked for himself, so he didn't believe in vacations, and that's where I have that same attitude. I never was into just like vacations. It made me really uncomfortable. Just be laying there and not doing much. But again, it's it's something that has been programmed and that others have basically accepted. But then again, as Nellie was saying, that you have women who say, this is what you're supposed to do. This is the way it is. This is always going to be the way it is. It's almost like cultures who have, like in India, the caste system. That says, well, you're of this caste. That's just the way it is. You will never rise above this caste. And a number of those individuals, who have the wherewithal, would save up their money and then they leave that country. And then found themselves in America with all of its problems and everything, but they still were able to actually get away from the caste system as long as they stayed away from their own so-called culture of people from that country. Then they can become whatever they want to become. That's the funny thing about monetary stuff also. If a person is supposedly doesn't have any money, then they find some way to make a lot of money. Then all of a sudden, he has a lot of money. He's no longer this. But depending on whether he wants to interact with other people of another caste system who has money, they'll still thumb their nose at him. But within the broader culture, he's considered or she's considered someone who is viable because they have X amount of dollars and things. So, anyone want to add to that, or we can actually change the conversation?
I going a little bit off of that. I just was talking with someone the other day about how our values or what we value, because we are born into family, into a culture, into society that they all have their programming or what is seemed valuable to them. And then we grow up thinking these are our values, but really, I think like our talents and our gifts are more appreciated when you get out to where you are needed, I guess, so to speak. Like you said with the Indian person getting out of the caste system, like they might have not seemed valuable or important there, so they went where they could be respected and valued somewhere else. But is that kind of, I guess, going off of that values in general, like, is it all programming? Because when, like, people do things based off of their needs, like their behavior is based off of them trying to meet a need, right?
Yeah, and the whole concept of need, which sometimes people get a little kind of annoyed with me when I say that we don't need anything.
Mm.
We just desire to be here, or we're afraid not to be.
Mm.
So in
Okay.
essence, someone said, you need to live, you need to be here. And I was like, no, I don't need to be anywhere. But if you don't believe that there's something else beyond this, then you're afraid to leave. But in reality, as far as like need, again, when we talk about just life and death, for instance, or transition, I would call it, there are people who spend their whole lives fearing death. I've known people like that also. Some are just hypochondriacs. They're afraid of every freaking thing. And I had a friend who would just tell me all the chemicals and things there and this, that, and so on and so forth. And, after a while listening to it for a few minutes, I just get retired. I said, look, on top of it, she was EVing me. She was tapping into my energy and was draining it with all that stuff. I would just say, look, how can you live if you're so afraid of dying? And, it almost like it would just go right over her head. And then she would start up again. And I was just like, okay, we're going to end this conversation here. I don't need to be here. You don't need to be here. But there's a desire to be here, whether you're afraid of what might happen if you transition out, because they use all the religious stuff, there's hell, and, they're talking about a heaven, but most people are like, oh, I might go to hell because I did a whole lot of things that, the church says you're not supposed to do. So as far as like need, it's like a desire. Do you desire to continue this journey? Or are you just afraid of what might happen if you don't continue this journey?
Mm.
So if you get rid of the fear of that and understand that, there's no necessity, and you get to the point where I'm here because I desire to see what's around the next corner. Other than, I'm just afraid because of being afraid. I mean, there's a logical fear also. But I'm here because I want to see what's around the next corner. And I'll be honest with you, there were times in the past where I was working so freaking hard and just felt like there was very little reward, even though, I was living in a nice place and everything, but I was spending just so much time trying to maintain all that stuff. And people sit there at one point and say, if this is all there is, if this is what's going to happen, I'm not enjoying myself. If this is what it's all about, then I'm through. I'm done. And I never came to the point where I'm looking at, sticking a gun in my mouth or hanging myself from something. But I actually put it out there, very honestly. If this is all there is, all this struggle, all this stress, then I don't need to be here, man.
Right.
And, something say, just, stick around, things are going to get better. But it was never a person. It was always something that I could sense was telling me to stick around, things are going to get better.
Right.
But things got better once I got off of the program. So it was like the renegade, basically coming into the village and getting his supplies and then leaving and going back out into the jungles where he lived. And that's literally how I felt for a good part of my life. I went in, I knew how to play the game. There's cultures in Africa. There was an African shaman, West African shaman, Maladoma Somé, who told me about this trick that one village would use against another, but not so much against another village, but if they had to do business with a neighboring village that's not very necessarily friendly to them, they would put their intent in a rock. They would just basically pick up, a rock and they blow their intent onto the rock like that, put it in their pocket, and they their belief is so, and their intent was so strong, they would go into that village and they would do business. But also they knew that their intent would wear off on that rock, so they had to get in there, do business within the time that they sensed that their intent would last. They would do business successfully, trade or whatever they're trading, get back to their village. No problem. And that's what I started feeling myself doing, because I definitely am not into the programs and not into the system. So it was as though I would actually physically change my energy to go into places and do business, sometimes mimicking the person that I'm doing business with, mind you. And it's kind of weird stuff. Someone would have a certain type of laugh, and I find myself mimicking that laugh while we're talking. It would make them so very, very, relaxed and so comfortable. And then I'd get what I needed, go to the business I needed, and then I'd make my way back to my, to my headquarters. So I sense the same thing. I feel that, that it's like intent on what you want. So, if you're feeling like, well, I'm just, a woman, or, which I don't like that, just a business, but I am a female in a very hostile environment. But if your intent is to override their program, because men who are looking at you that way aren't the brightest bulbs. They're programmed. They're running a program. So when people are running programs, it's easy to override a program if they don't know that they're running a program, and you know that they are.
No, that's true. That makes sense.
It's like when you say they're not one of us, they're one of them, type of thing.
As far as those who are running programs.
Yeah, like I see it like that. Like if it's somebody like where you help me understand how to view people in the sense of not human but more so consciousness. And then when I started doing that, I started being able to like separate the different types of programs that everybody's running. So like now I'm to the point where like somebody comes up to me, I'm like, oh, you're in that type of program, got it. And I just like, and I feel like even like what she was saying about values and things like that, that's a form of programming. And one thing that I've learned from you, Mr. Harry, is I feel like it's a part of the linear programming where it limits us in a way of thinking, because even, when we say the values, there's still values that were taught to us by a programming, essentially. So we're still trying to hold on to a part of that, but yet still trying to find that freedom. And for me, I know that when I first came to Mr. Harry, my struggle was love, feeling like, oh, I'm never going to be loved. No one's ever going to love me. And that was a form of fear programming and thinking linear, where now when I don't think linear, I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to not be without love because I've learned how to love myself. The universe loves me. I love the universe. And I found gratitude, and I just changing the way I view things away from how I've been programmed to see things. I see a lot more. So like the values that you may be thinking that have been instilled in you in programming, for me, removing myself from those values, I see that those values are such a limitation to what we can actually allow ourselves essentially to experience. Because for me, like even when I find myself with someone that I'm attracted to or anything like that, I always say, okay, versus I want to be with them and I'm never going to let them go. And I'm like, okay, if it's meant for me to experience them, then I'm going to experience them, because I'm allowing that experience knowing that I love myself. So I'm not going into it with any lack or any, expectations. It's just, if it's meant to last, it's going to last, but nothing's meant to last forever. It's an experience and then you move on. So if you look at life where instead of values, but more so like for me, lessons, and what can I get from this? Like how you said, what can I get from this village that's going to help me along my journey, and then stop over and get another, whatever I need from another village. Like each experience, grab something and grow from it.
Yeah.
And create essentially your own form of values without the programming.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting, because, I've been telling a lot of individuals as far as like the whole concept, and I understand when you're using love, your intent is very clear. But some individuals, they use the term love, it's kind of like all over the place. Yeah. So then I just said, I said, well, what's the difference between, loving or love and respect and consideration? So, for myself, one of the things I realized for myself, it's like I have total respect and consideration for myself. But I did use the learn, the I love myself, mantra for decades. And one that really, really started to click was when I started to say, I have total respect and consideration for myself. And one of the things I've run into with some of the women who talk about love, issues around love, I would say, well, okay, you're talking about relationship with with a man or whatever. You felt you loved the man, and that you said you loved yourself. But then I asked her, I said, well, have you ever done anything in that situation where you did not respect yourself? And they would always go, oh yeah. So I'm saying, well, then it's kind of like you don't really love yourself.
Yeah.
Because you're doing things where you don't, where you feel like you haven't respected yourself, because they separate that, and it shouldn't be separated. The concept of love, to me, is like I have total respect and consideration for myself. Therefore, I care about how I'm going to feel after I do some things. And if I'm going to do something that belittles me, how am I going to really live with myself, really? But that's me personally.
And a lot of us have that all backwards, where we feel like we have to endure stuff that belittles us or takes away from us in order to show or prove to someone else that that we truly love them. But even if you love someone or something, you have to choose you first.
Yes, because that person is supposed to respect you too, have total respect and consideration for you. They're not supposed to, disrespect yourself to prove that you care about me. If someone asks you to disrespect yourself to prove that you care about them, you better walk in the other direction real fast.
That's also
he's a total dick and a half. And you wouldn't be the first woman that he's done that to.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one thing I can bring to it. I do know dudes. So anyway, so for me, as I would say to my sisters that I grew up with, I said, have respect for yourself. Have total respect for yourself first. And you know what happens? You get the wolves coming out of every crevice, trying to you're a challenge. How am I going to get this person to disrespect herself for me? For his weak ego. Because if he gets you to disrespect yourself for him, guess what? He's going to move on, because he's feeding off of you for one thing. Also, he's feeding on your energy. So he's going to go off and find another one to try to do the same thing to. Because he's like a little program. He's a little robot that's designed to just feed. Not just men are like that. People in general are like that way. I mean, I like it. But we're talking about, interaction between male and female.
Talking about how some women do that program too, where they'll find a guy who's nice because they think, oh, he's a sucker. And then they follow the same route over and over. A sucker. This one's a sucker. And they just suck them dry of everything that they have.
Yeah, well, I've had women here want, I want a nice guy, but the nice guy, he's got to be a mama's boy. or he's just a pushover because he's treating her really, really nice. Not to say that, no one's 100% balanced anyway. But, I've had in the past when I was pretty much like a mama's boy for a minute back there. And that's because my mother had me thinking that, as a man, I'm just foul just for being a man, because of her relationships with men in the past, and the fact that my father was never, somebody who really, I should say, catered to some of the things that she needed. Not that he needed to cater 20%, but 100%. But he wasn't giving as much as I even felt that he should have in that situation. So, I was just like, wow, I almost felt like I had to put up with women being angry at other men that they couldn't get to do what they wanted them to do, or at least be fair with them. And so if I came in too soft, I was the whipping boy for every man that, that upset her or mistreated her. But
I feel like a lot of women, more so who don't grow up with fathers, have a harder time with that programming, where they just fall for any type of treatment as long as it's a man. To feel like that sense of avoiding the program.
But again, you're talking about programming from the older community telling her that you need a man. Now, sexual desire is just sexual desire. It's very, it's basically organic, and I don't think love has anything to do with it.
And that's why I feel like they accept, like, they tolerate the abusive ones and things like that, where it's more so of that fatherly role because they've missed out on that. Like, I have a few people that I've been working on that have been struggling with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, you're trying to find a father that you don't know how he would have been, but you're going off of the programming that everybody's like, oh, you have to have this, whatever. Like the illusion of what it should look like.
Right.
And it's like a super program, and it's something that I see a lot that's pretty common. And then when they do leave that situation, they keep going back like, oh, but I miss him. And then when they're with him, they're like, he treats me like crap. And it's like, well, what do we do here? Because it's like a hamster wheel.
Well, what I say to a lot of when I'm working on them, one of the areas that I clear is the reproductive area. I clear that area because every individual, every male that they've had an intimate relationship with, he leaves something there. So the women who are coming and they say, well, this guy's a real jerk, but something keeps drawing me back to him. That is to do with someone's energy in you. Yeah, an attachment, literally. And, that's talking, saying, remember the good times. Remember, and what I used to say is like, look at it as a scale and see which weighs out, the good times or the bad times. If the bad times are too, more heavy than the good times, go with that. Realizing that I don't care if we've had, like 10% good times, you've had 90% bad times. But the attachment will tell you that, just don't look at that. Look at the good times. Because I'm setting you back up so you can be fed off of again. And they keep going back and forth, and then they get tapped out at a certain point. And there are women who say, I don't know why I keep choosing the wrong guy. But, I've also, when I was in my 20s, I've seen women that I was in school with who were really pretty when they were in, high school and so on and so forth. And they end up with these types of dudes. And by the time they're 25, they look like they're 40. And then, and there's guys basically and my mom used to use this term, talk a hole in their head. Oh, you're pretty. They'll use all those key words that, has to do with, women are concerned about their beauty because of the opposite sex 9 times out of 10. So if a guy, has a certain look, or if he's confident enough, because I've seen some guys like werewolves, but they're confident, and they'll end up with a really pretty girl. He has to do just confidently say all this garbage, and then, she'll go with them. And then, this whole back and forth that goes on for a while. And then by the time they're 25, like I said, they look really rough. And at the time, I was like one of these guys, I was into building my career, so I wasn't spending a lot of money on nice clothes and all this stuff. And later for spending a lot of money on cars, things. So, I may not have been wearing the snazziest sneakers or whatever it is, but these same women would look at me and just like, look at those Kmart, whatever he's wearing, and stuff like that. Or I'm working really hard and I'm dirty with my father. We used to do a lot of trucking and moving things and salvaging. So, you're not going to be dressed in a 3-piece suit doing that kind of work. But it was work, and we were taking care of family, and I would get made fun of. So by the time I was 25 and, pushing along and actually, starting to move along with, with my business and my plans, I run into some of these individuals who, when I was younger, they were looking down, and all of a sudden they're looking, oh, look at you. Hey, hi, and I'm like, oh, yeah. So, the game does, it does permeate, it does affect, both sexes. But again, what we're talking about really when you come to sex, we're talking about people who are very dense opposed to people who are not dense, or less dense, I should say. So very dense, middle of the road, where individuals who are around really cool people, really around bad people. And then you just have people who are just, serial nice people, and those tend to be the ones that get victimized the most, whether they're male or female. But again, this world is male heavy, too male heavy. in how things are done. They don't want the feminine in there because if the feminine comes in with their logic, proper logic, they can't wage wars all over the place. You know, they can't piss where they sleep because somebody's going to say, you know, that's nasty. You know,
Right.
or logical about the concept of money. How much money do you really need?
Right.
You know, we're taking care of business. That's cool. We got enough savings for this, that, and the other. I don't need Bill Gates cash.
No.
Besides, it's finite anyway. You spend all your whole time running around, chasing cash and so on and so forth. Which again, I have no problem with capital. That's part of what goes on here. But I still look at it as a tool. But I knew that I didn't want to spend my whole life just chasing that and counting money in a freaking dungeon and not actually experiencing the world or even experiencing my consciousness and to as full as I could experience it in this lifetime. And that's what I really think I really like to actually try to introduce more, the understanding of actually expressing your consciousness. And then realizing that you are a consciousness expressing yourself vehicle as a woman.
Shaman Nelly brought up the like that some of our clients were struggling with the concept of not having like a father or a parental figure. And I remember Nami told me once, because I was...
Nami's my daughter.
Nami, yes. She told me once, she's like, I see that you're struggling letting your parents go and feeling like if I don't have parents, then I'm an orphan. They give you all these labels to make you feel like you lack. And she's like, imagine if stars are consciousness, if the sun is a consciousness, they don't have parents, right? But they don't feel like they lack because they're connected to Supreme Consciousness. They're connected, they feel complete in themselves. And I was like, okay, I can do this. She's like, you have allowed you have allowed yourself to be defined by your family, allowed yourself to be defined by your physicality as a woman, or you define yourself as the race that you are, or the country that you live in, but instead being complete in yourself and being connected to Supreme Consciousness.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that in, because that is really where I want to be anyway, where we're talking about, consciousness on that level. And what you're talking about is all of the boxes that are created. Boxes are natural. It's just a means to keep people from really understanding and consciousness from really understanding who and what they are. So separate, the cosmos from, the earth plane, or people talk about, out in the universe, which is not correct because we're in the universe. The universe is not separate from us. We are in the universe. So when she's talking about all of that, all of that is where we come from originally. All those stars and all those things, and and there's been cultures, indigenous cultures for centuries, who understood that. So even if they talk about Mother Earth in the West, they talk about it in a really bizarre kind of like compartmental way, as they use the word Mother Earth, but it doesn't seem like they actually see Earth as a consciousness. Just see it as, I don't know, a thing or just a place that they can cut up and, and claim parts of it and all of this other kind of stuff,
Yeah, I remember some of the videos. I remember watching these videos about like turtles with these barnacles all over it. And this scientist was saying, look what Mother Earth has done to this turtle. I'm like, that has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, the reason they got barnacles is because, men have made things out of whack, in other words, put things out of balance in nature. Therefore, what would normally have kept the barnacles off the turtle isn't there anymore. Or when they were doing this thing, I don't know, back in the 70s or whatever, maybe starting in the 60s, the nuclear power plants and all that. And they made these excuses for that it was going to make energy cheaper and all, and everything. And it never happened. They just built these things, and then they show you pictures of two-headed turtles and snakes and stuff like that, and weird fish with, all that. And that's literally all it did. So one of the things also is looking at, just to bring it into a certain perspective of a holistic thing, that why is it necessary for these things to exist? Why is it necessary? If if you pay attention, for me, that's one of the great things about being mature. I've read a lot of stuff, I've heard a lot of stuff, I've seen a lot of stuff, and I've seen a lot of lies over the decades. Things that they say, oh, we're doing this to make this better or that better, and in reality, all it did was make things worse. So, what are they working for? What's the point of polluting the planet? Who are you working for? It's illogical.
Right.
Why would I kill a place that I need to live?
Mm-hmm.
Where I need to live. So that's when we're talking about going into what's on the other side. What's behind the programming? What's behind all of this? All these putting everything in, compartmentalizing everything. If you compartmentalize things, nothing will work holistically.
Yeah. I remember you said that it's easier to understand. Like a lot of people sometimes they'll come up and complain about, oh, look what Trump is doing. Oh, look, something happening on the other side of the world. Oh, this is negative. That's negative. I'm like, we're in a feeding farm. Are you surprised? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. Presidents never had power. They
Never.
Yeah. I mean, logic. Let's say I'm one of those, the ones that like to use Rothschilds and these guys. I got uber billions of dollars and so on and so forth. And then we get this president who may be making $1 million or so a year or something like that. And he's laying down the law. I can buy and sell this clown. Why am I going to listen to him? He's just a representative of who has the money, but then they're the representative of the things on the other side that really benefit from all of the nastiness that goes on this planet.
I tell people when it comes to like Trump, the energy and things like that, a key component to prove that is that what president monopolizes on social media. That's like the biggest feeding farm for energy on either side. So he tweets certain things and it's like social media, they react to it. And I tell people, like, if you don't react, it doesn't exist. You don't feed it, it doesn't grow. Like, just
all right.
Don't let it in. Like, just let it go.
That's logical.
Mm-hmm.
Very logical.
Like you said, water off a duck speck.
Yeah, literally. I mean, what is this latest disease or whatever they claim is out of China?
Coronavirus.
Everybody knows that. I can tell you just from experience, it's bull.
Yeah, like it's funny because then they start saying like, oh, they have they printed on Lysol cans, the human coronavirus. I'm like, do you know that's like your average flu, but it's still conscious and it's still energy. And if you allow it, that means you're giving it power to come get to you. If you don't acknowledge it, it doesn't exist. Therefore, you don't,
if you don't give it any power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you don't give it any power. When I stopped having the common cold was when I realized that the common cold was a consciousness. So when it started up, I said, no, you don't. But, at that time I got to the point, I just like rip it out. I haven't had a cold in decades.
That's how I've learned with you teaching me how it becomes an attachment. That's how I've learned how to remove it from myself too. Like when certain things, I feel certain things or where it feels like a cold, I'm like, oh no, I know what it is. And I immediately understand that it's consciousness, so I'm able to remove it versus let me go feed myself all this medicine and all this other stuff that's just gonna keep feeding it versus helping me.
Yeah, and two, the medicines. I've had a lot of people come through, and I start working on them, and I start pulling things, and then we get this blast of like pharmaceuticals, and some of them say that they haven't used it in like 7 years or whatever, but I still get this strong blast of pharmaceuticals. And pharmaceuticals are primarily designed to just shut down your sensitivity. It doesn't heal anything. It shuts down your sensitivity to what's wrong in the body.
Right.
So I kind of lost my train of thought. Sorry about that.
Well, if you don't come back to it, I had another thought.
Yeah, go ahead. This will come back around.
Okay. I do like what you teach with Neo Shamanism that gives, for example, women leverage that is equal or more than the male persona that's really highlighted out there in the media and out there.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's like when with Neo Shamanism, it's like in the world they try to out there they treat you like, okay, if you're buff, if you know kung fu, you can fight off these guys, or maybe you have a taser, or you have some like pepper spray or something. That's how you defend yourself as a woman. But with Neo Shamanism, it's like, no, I contain him with a containment barrier. I see what is around him that's going to attack me, and I nullify that issue, and I don't have to be super manly to deal with the situation. And I really love that.
Yeah.
Or you're just being
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one huge
We got
factor for me,
midnight.
and that's actually what helped me get rid of my fear programming, is understanding that very thing.
Yeah. Dealt with that a lot. Like when I used to play basketball with guys, I would play. I'd have to, because of how the realm works, I'd have to prove myself every time I joined a basketball game. Like guys would immediately think, oh, she's weak because she's the girl. We don't want her on our team. And I'd be like, yeah, whatever. And so I would get in there because I felt like, you know what, I'm viable, you're viable, let's play. And so they would like figure out that, hey, I can actually compete just as much as them. But you know what? It was interesting just to watch. Now that you taught me that competition is just dense, but it was interesting just to watch the dynamics with them and how they treated me once they found out that I'm just as viable. I believe like if I show and I strengthen the Neo Shamanic techniques that you taught me, I can be right up in any kind of dense situation and just succeed, be balanced no matter what I'm dealing with. And also it encouraged like other people to follow that kind of behavior, and I've just learned to love it. And I'm moving myself away from just everything I've ever defined myself with, and I feel really happy.
I could totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to really change in order to change. You have to let go of a lot of things that that others have put on you, thinking having you think that you needed it, but in reality, it's like really jumping empty-handed into the void with this. But it's not like I give information, so you have some prep, when you do make that jump, and your mind goes racing, But anyone who's actually decided, like Nelly's decided to do that, then we saw really great things happening. Yeah. And and it's not masculine to be nervy.
Right.
With me, I'm just not into any consciousness being dog, literally, your consciousness. So I'm not interested in seeing you, being subjugated, others interfering with your trajectory and how you want to expand and express yourself. My artist background tells me I like the concept of expression and expansiveness. I like exploring, and I think that you should feel free to do that. And and no one's going to really stop you, because they try to pretend that there's the thought police. That's a bunch of nonsense. They can't figure out what you're thinking. They just figure out that you're not moving along, in that same that same circle that everyone else is moving in. That you jumped outside of the circle, and they'll try to scare you back in, but they can't really physically pull you back in there unless you have a certain fear that they can.
Like, you helped me understand it when you said that it's kind of like I'm training in the middle of like a battle zone. And I do feel that, and it's like I feel like the more forward I go, the attachments or the energy that's trying to like either discourage me or get me back into that box, it gets stronger. But then to me it comes off weaker because I see it so like a lot more clearer. So it's like all that effort, and I'm just like like recently I'm a tattoo artist, so with the whole Kobe Bryant death and everything like that, one of my clients is Shaquille O'Neal's son, and I tattooed, like just like a memorial thing or whatever. And he posted it on his social media. He has like 2 million people that follow him, and he just posted it from an angle. He's 7 foot tall, so his angle, it was fresh out. It didn't look that clear, but he didn't want it. He did it on purpose, and then he put "not done yet." And the next morning, I wake up and all the blog sites got it, and everybody's like hitting me up, and then the comments, and everybody's like, oh, you paid this much money, it looks like crap, like just tearing it down because they didn't understand the piece. But here I have a video of it, and it looks great. He loves it, I love it, and everybody's like checking on me like, are you okay? I'm like, I'm so unbothered, like you guys have no idea, this is really not bothering me. But had I not understood the programming, it would have discouraged me, especially as an artist, because like you said, like we express ourselves through the artistry, and because I'm so passionate about it, but I understood that it was just energy that was trying to attack me, and I understood it, so I contained it, I blocked it, I put my phone away, I didn't deal with it, and I was fine. And then like even the next day, people are like, are you? I'm like, I promise you, I'm not. There's nothing. I'm so unbothered by it.
Yeah.
But in that, at that caliber of attention, if I would not understand it, I feel like being involved in a program, watching people allow social media to just eat them up, when it's like all these people that are saying things, you're literally just reading it. So essentially, no one is really saying anything to you. You're just creating that response or the tone in your mind and your consciousness when you read it. So if you don't even acknowledge it, there's no way it can affect you.
Right. Well,
Because I'm like, I don't know these people personally. Everybody has their own opinion. They're stupid. They're not, part of my journey, part of my path. I'm like, whatever. And I'm just like, okay, lower density. Got it.
Yeah. Well, again, they're like robots, literally.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what it felt like. And I was like, trying to explain it to people. I'm like, these are just like, I call them bots. Same thing as robots. But it's just funny how like energy works, because people will allow something that to me now, I view it as so unrealistic. You know what I mean? Because essentially we choose what we allow into our consciousness to affect us. So if you break it down even further, well, it helps me understand it that if I allow something that has consciousness to affect my consciousness, it was my fault because I opened the door to that. It's like somebody coming unannounced to your house and they're knocking on your door. You don't have to open the door. You can look through the peephole and say, all right, and then walk away from it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I like that.
Yeah, I like that too.
This would have been like 3 years ago. I would have freaked out like, oh my gosh.
Well, but again, I feel that it really strengthens you in a much more realistic way. When you understand that what you're dealing with, those who are trying to threaten or those who are trying to bring you down, they're the weakest form of consciousness. They've been brought down to a level where they're just literally, like I said, robots. They're just programs, and they just walk in lockstep with everything that they're told to walk in lockstep with. And so one of the things what used to happen with NSTHA, that you would have these weird confrontations or people approaching you and random, just being really aggressive and things. Before you really started getting into the work.
Like at the market, there would be like random guys. Like one time we went to go buy fruits, and I'm just walking, and suddenly this guy comes running up behind me. He's like, you have you make a mistake, and I'm just like, whoa, okay. So like I immediately, because of how I've lived my life, my body just had a program to like kind of get small, walk fast, and go straight instead. But then she dealt with him in a way, and he's like, you need to confront sometimes, and I'll teach you how. How did you deal with him?
Well, again, when people are literally just programs, you just deal with what's around them. So you start to not really just look at who's yelling at you or who's trying to be aggressive. I haven't had anything like that in a long, long time, but a lot of it had to do with, I could read what's on a person and what's basically, it's like people like puppets who have some things hand jammed up their butt and making their mouth. And so when you just look to see what's, making them talk like that, because I know everything is about them creating some dense energy and trying to make me feel uncomfortable so that they can feed off it and, off of me. So if you have a situation where, someone just really just rattles you, how do you feel at the end? You usually feel pretty drained, pretty tired after something like that. So I know what's going on. So this idiot is walking up and he's being aggressive, or with NSTHA, and I just basically just shut him down. Literally, I just and I just really I didn't threaten to hit him or anything. I just said, "What's your problem?" And and I'm looking and I'm talking not to him, to the thing that was working his face. What did he do? He just kind of and then he had to walk away.
Whenever after we went home that day, I remember thinking like, oh, men, they suck. There's just guys, they're crazy and they suck. And then you were like, well, think about what part of you was involved with that situation. Look at your posture. You're in control of you can fight to make your posture straighter, right? You can confront him in a balanced way, or in a way that will solve the situation, like you said, blowing on the stones, with the intent that will make him become calm. And I totally didn't. And I didn't even recognize my part. I just wanted to blame it all on the whole of men.
Well, what
that
happened
makes so much sense.
Well, what happened when he started, Mercedes' posture just immediately went like that. And it was more of a victim posture, which means that the person wasn't going to stop. So, so it's really, and it's a program that someone's not aware of, because it was something that was, that started when you were a kid.
Yeah.
So, individuals, and that's another interesting thing, when you grow up and you have people like leaning on you in a weird way, and you have another sibling, and nobody's really leaning on them that way. It means your energy vibration is different. Yeah. And the more individuals lean on you, it means the more energy you really do have, and they're feeding on that energy. The person they're not feeding on, their energy is not as strong as yours. But they try to basically beat down energy because they understand it as also consciousness. The more energy you have, your consciousness starts to clear all the noise out of your head. So I've had clients who said they'd be on the table, and I'm working on them, and I'm telling them things, and they said there's just all this noise and static going on in their head. And then finally, I reach and find something that's actually creating that static and pull it out. And we'll have to use some other objects, herbal things and stuff like that has a certain type of energy to quiet the noise. But once I quiet the noise, then they started to expand more. Yeah. But there's all this noise. There was this guy who wrote the book, Journeys Out of the Body, and I think his second book, he would have these out-of-body experiences. And one of them, he ended up outside of the Earth plane looking at the planet, and he said it was covered with this brown haze, really, and it was all this noise in it. So, you're trying to expand yourself, but you're trying to expand yourself like in a subway station with the trains going by. You're trying to hear the person that's standing next to you talking to you. Like even in a club, where the music is going, and then someone's trying to tell you something, and they got to get in your ear and yell in your ear so that you can hear what's going on. And that's literally what the Earth has been. So what happens is that really there is some kind of almost like a Zen type of way of actually pulling yourself in and blocking out the noise, so that you can hear what's going on the other side that is in support of you as a consciousness. And when you get, connected to that, then logic comes a lot easier.
That day also. So like there was a lot of times I've seen people, because I'm speaking from experience, dealing with situations in a very extreme way, either extremely victim or extremely violent. And like if you were to have told me that day to deal with that man, I would have immediately be like, get the fuck away from me, right? One imbalance to the other imbalance. But instead, you're teaching me a Neo Shamanic practice where it's more like Zen, more balanced. Like, okay, I'll deal with you. What's up, guy? What's your problem? But instead of like, I'm going to freaking knock your head off.
But again, you're not talking to this. You're really not talking to that fool. You're talking to the thing that is controlling.
Yeah.
Because they will shift if you start to focus on the thing and realize anyone who's being a problem, there's something inside of them or that's around them that's causing them to be a problem.
One thing I've learned too on my Neo Shamanic journey is the balancing is when I encounter situations where I would usually, like in the past, like react to it, like something similar to that. I started paying attention to where I hold energy in my body. So like I noticed that it's certain people who vibrate at a certain dense energy, I clench my feet really hard
Oh,
in my
wow.
in my shoes, because then I feel like subconsciously like I'm not showing it, you know. So then if it's something that's really irritating me, I realize that I carry it in my stomach. So any type of thing, like for example, that social media thing that just happened recently, I felt it in my feet, and I was like, okay, if I allow my feet to stay tight, I'm feeding it. So then it helped me remember to
Oh, wow.
just breathe and find the Zen place within me. And I felt like I took myself to a place where felt like I was floating, like in this just like Zen space. And I was just like, okay. And then there's like all the noise that was trying to attack me is like I couldn't even hear it. I just felt like I wasn't even meditating or anything like that. It was just literally breathing and being aware of it, and like being conscious of like, okay, I gotta unloosen my toes one by one with each breath. I was like relaxing my feet. And once I felt like everything flowing to me, like the noise just stopped. And I was like, oh, okay. Even when I was telling you my car got towed that time, and everybody was like, why are you not having I'm like, for what? It happened. If I feed it, then its purpose is gonna have more power over me. Whereas like breathe, get that energy out my my body, and it's like just being more aware of where I'm holding certain things, because subconscious, like we were not really conscious of it. Like if you're walking around, like you don't pay attention that you're not really relaxing where you think you are, or like you don't realize like you're squeezing your butt too tight, and then like at the end of the day you're like, why am I so sore and so exhausted? It's because like I realized like I was just like tense all day because I was squeezing a part of my body based off of whoever I was around. So now it's like I have to just have that constant state of just Zen, even in my physical body, where I understand that if I could connect my physical Zen, then I'm there. But it's just wild, like just to think how much power you can actually have over situations like the grocery store. Like versus like I used to do the extreme thing too. I remember we had that conversation, Miss Alacia, when I was in. I was like, felt like a badass. I was like,
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because my older sister was one of, I already told you about her. She was one of those who would deal with it in the most extreme manner, as well. And of course, she's older than me, so we're not like young kids or anything. But she still a tough cookie, and she's been really, I actually always enjoyed whenever she backed men down. It was just really entertaining to me, the way that she would do it, because she's short on top of it. And, and she just, after certain, she just won't take any mess. And it's not just men. She'll, if it's women, she'll do the same thing with women, but she doesn't delineate anymore since she got to a certain point. Her husband passed the year before last, and she's, blossoming into this, this new freedom. And actually, I see some of the things that I really liked about her as a kid, coming to the fore again. And not to go backwards or anything. It's not about going backwards. But she's also, I've been training her in a sense, having to do with what's around people. So these individuals who will approach, and in America, actually one of the things that I want to just for a second, one of the things that really was interesting to me was over a year ago. When was it I asked? It was about 3 women in the space at the time, and I asked, it had to do with how women are treated by men, and it seemed like they all said that they're not treated well by men, like in general. And it was just kind of an interesting thing, because I said, well, maybe periodically, or not periodically, but, there's problems. But the way that, do you remember that? It's like it was almost like a 24/7.
Oh yeah, like for example, whenever Mr. C asked me, so what's life like as a woman? I'm like, well, you go outside and people hit on you. You go to the grocery store and people try to hit on you. You go to the gym and they bother you about your form and try to get you to work out like they work out, and it's kind of a constant thing. But that was before.
Well, I think it was like, because we were talking about their assumption that you're supposed to put up with their garbage or something like that. And, and it was interesting to me because, I never had that approach, but I never liked to hang out with a group of guys anyway. When I was, younger, yeah, you played ball or whatever. But after it was over, it was, I couldn't think of anything more boring than sitting around with a bunch of guys talking about sports. I was involved in men's groups, and those were because we were supposed to be talking about things that were more progressive or trying to improve our lives and so on and so forth, and not so much a sit and bash women type of thing. And sometimes that would happen a little bit, but I would always try to keep it on track to something where we're doing some self-improvement and more of an expansive way of looking at things. But again, I didn't have as much wherewithal as I have now. So my approach, to tell you the truth, being involved in a men's group, I don't know. I really don't know these days. And I was involved for at least 3 years in those types of things. And there were some things that I learned that that I did gain from it. But a lot of it just felt like people getting together and just not really just dancing around the actual issues.
Mm-hmm.
So it just ended up being this just monotonous, circular thing. The more men that were in the group, the less was, the less progress we had in those particular types of things, meetings, excuse me. But it was something, again, having to do with men not really being aware, or maybe with their program not even caring. I lived in New York City for, a good 13 years, and there's nothing worse than watching women walk past a construction site in Midtown New York.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the kind of catcalling and just, straight up obnoxious stuff.
Sometimes they'll touch you too.
Yeah, some they'll like, if she's dressed in, the uniform to entice a man, some will go up there and, try to pinch him and stuff like that.
Yikes.
When I see guys do that, I'm like, make that make sense for me. Like, what in your mind is the outcome of that? Like, if you just grope a woman or like invade her personal space, like, how do you process that in your mind? Like, what is the outcome? Like,
Yeah, it makes no sense. Literally, and as a male, I'm looking at it, and I can appreciate an attractive woman and an attractive figure, but the part of like invading that zone was never a part of it.
mm-hmm.
But some of it, I was just a little bit, more standoffish in a lot of ways when I was much younger. That way, it had to be kind of like a mutual thing. So I was so afraid of, and that had to do with my mom, I think. So afraid of insulting, the woman with my approach. I've seen so many men, insult women with that approach.
Mm-hmm.
And there were times that there were women that were interested in me that seemed like trouble. So, my senses would go out, and everyone hit and all this, and I'm like, I'm feeling something, man. So what kind of man are you that you feel? So I would avoid them, and there have been times that I avoided some real trouble. I found out later about that particular person that there was a real problem with them. But anyway, I didn't even take it off from there.
No, it reminds me of like when you said, stop seeing them as a man and see them as a damaged consciousness. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah.
Well, I think that's really the start of it. If you start to look at people as consciousness before you see them as their gender, then you'll say, wow, that's a really damaged consciousness of some guy who's being a real meathead, Or in the same vein, there are women who are troublesome to other women.
Damaged consciousness.
Another consciousness, damaged.
Yeah.
That helped me out a lot when you taught me that, to look at like, my perspective and my outlook. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. It's like it's sort of like you cut yourself from the herd, and it's so liberating. It's like there's more fresh air outside of the herd than it is like in that cluster of people, trying to follow.
Like literally, it feels like a box. It really does.
Because it is a box. It's an imaginary box that has been created, and that you've been told that the walls, end here and here and here and here, and then but it's almost as though you're walking around blind and you're just taking their word for it. You can't go further than this. In this direction you can't go but so far in this direction, go so far in that direction. Then you close your eyes to it, and then you just start feeling your way around, and all of a sudden you feel a nice breeze.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and all of a sudden you're out in a place where you feel more free. How are we doing?
We're doing 1:34.
Okay, 1:34. We got another 24 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. How's it going, everyone? Do you feel it's interesting enough?
Yeah, it's interesting.
I just woke up. Wait a minute. I'm just playing.
Well, speaking of feminine and masculine, sometimes I believe that different types of approach towards getting something or reaching a goal has been defined as masculine or feminine. For example, like I'm trying to reach this goal and there's this big, thick glass wall. How are you going to approach it, right? And before I used to always say, yeah, you just gotta hit it. You just gotta keep on hitting it, bam, 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 bam. Just like bludgeon your fists in the wall. And you're like, wow, that's very like programmed masculine. And I'm like, what are you talking about? That's the only way you gotta do things. You're like,
Right.
well, how about? And then you said I'm a balanced consciousness. I have both my feminine and masculine intact. When I see it, I don't see it as a thick glass wall. I see it as shards of glass coming down. And I dance within the shards, and I don't touch anything, and I make my way straight through with minimal effort and maximum success. And I was like, wow, I have a bloody fist, I broke my bones, and still the wall is there. Obviously, something needs to change about myself.
Yeah. Well, no, that's
I could totally relate to that, Ms. Alethea.
Yes, that's acknowledging and embracing what they call feminine, but really is balance, is really what it is. Your feminine is balance. So if they say that, you have to knock, because, you're programmed by everything, you're programmed by all kinds of movies and songs and everything. You have to knock it down. But in reality, you can just basically dance around these certain things and not get hit if you look at it in the proper way. So if you're looking at it, again, in a box and you're blinded, and they just tell you just throw punches forward and so on and so forth, and just keep throwing, and you wear yourself out. And it's designed for you to wear yourself out before you get frustrated because you're punching. Every time I get out there, I have to punch. The individuals and certain women that I've known who really have gotten around things, they use a holistic sense of themselves. So they're masculine when they have to stand up to something, but they don't necessarily punch anyone. They'll use both. I'll stand up to you, and then I'll dance around you, or I will finesse you. Get what I need to get. Because there's it's not necessary to literally just have to pummel someone to get what you want.
I feel like that comes from the programming of us thinking, like how you said earlier, where like we have to do certain things in the physical form, like how earlier you were saying, like you have to like know how to physically fight to get through some type of fighting, whereas through Neo Shamanism is literally just the balance of flowing through it.
Yeah, because the fighting is a program. They know all it's going to do, again, when there would be a situation where someone's confronting me in a certain way. And as in New York City is, there's a lot of that kind of stuff just with people in general. It's just a crazy place, at the time I was living there. And there were times when someone would challenge me in a certain way. And I'm not a small guy, but I would still try to give them some semblance of respect when I'm telling them to back off. So, one instance where some stupid thing over a parking space, I'll be darned if I'm going to, have to take somebody out or have someone take me out over a parking space. And this guy, once, he was in the wrong. Once we found this parking space, I get out, this other guy that I'm with, and this guy's like yelling and cursing it in my spot and so on and so forth. I said, look, man, you were all the way down there, but he didn't want to hear it. So I ended up just going, fuck you, man. And just by putting man at the end of it, it just kind of like threw him off. and then he just did some weird thing like, I give you a claw, and then he drove off. So, but if I just like, just straight up F you, I just threw that man in there and it just threw him off. So, yeah, again, it's about finessing. I didn't have to punch him. The guy that was, what if he comes back and keys your car? I said, this guy's not coming back to key my car. He came back, car was in perfect shape. But again, it's like learning how to finesse things. And again, as women, I feel that that's very, very key. So, not being afraid of, the male, which I find that a lot of women are, they feel like I should have one, but in the same vein, they're kind of afraid of them too.
Like they have to ask permission for certain things too.
Yeah, they have to have a male okay for whatever. And again, I'm down for consciousness expressing themselves. So if your consciousness is expressing yourself as a female, you don't need to ask this fool for any, any permission. And then we're talking about was it speech writers or something like that, about less than a week ago. And there was some guy who's, I think in England or whatever, who I'm not sure, don't hold me to it, but I know for a fact that this one guy, and he's supposed to be an eloquent speaker, but his writer's a woman. So, in reality, women have a lot more power and a lot more, going for them than they allow themselves to realize.
I also notice a lot that women kind of base their level of self-worth or how they should feel about themselves based off of how someone else treats them. But if they learn how to shift the perspective that people only treat them the way they see them treating themselves, it's a whole game changer, because women will sit there and, like, for example, my sister-in-law, she only allows herself to feel loved when my brother's intimate with her. And I'm like, you do know that that's dumb, right? She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, you're waiting on him to physically touch you for you to feel like you're worth anything, versus you showing him that you don't need him because you're fulfilling yourself within yourself from the inside out. Then it's a whole game changer. So she started going to the gym and doing a lot of other things. And it's like, now my brother's like, well, what are you doing that for? And I was like, I told you, start loving yourself more, or showing yourself more unconditional love versus sitting around waiting for this conditioned program type of love, or the illusion of what you think it should look like to fulfill you, because you're your own consciousness. You don't have to depend on another consciousness to fulfill you or make you feel like this is how I need to see myself.
Yeah. Well, and two, if and this obviously it's not an easy fix, but by her doing that and literally starting to take care of herself and not looking to him to basically validate her, then you're dealing with his insecurities.
He's like, why are you going to the gym
sees
so
now?
much?
Yeah, she sees now, because she's like, like before she would get offended or like they would argue, and I'm like, if you could sit back and pay attention to what he's doing and how he's arguing, you'll realize that he's essentially arguing with himself. And she started to not respond. And then one time I remember she said that they were in the car and he was going off on her, like they were, just trying to make a point, and she stayed quiet, and her oldest son was in the back. And my brother was like, you see, you just keep talking shit. And she was like, I haven't said a word. He's like, what do you mean you haven't said a word? You've been And then the son in the back was like, no, she hasn't said anything. And that's when he felt crazy. And I was like, because I know I'm not crazy. I know that I've been quiet this whole time. And then I was like, she told me about it, and I was like, you see? But if you keep feeding it, you're literally allowing yourself to be caught up in that. And that's only a battle that's going on within his own consciousness. And she's like, but it seems so crazy. I'm like, it is. I'm like, it is. So stop allowing yourself to feel less than, because those are his issues, not yours. And then now she's like, it's been like the easiest way for her to just disconnect from that type of energy when he gets like that.
Yeah, and pretty
And I'm
much
like, oh,
diffuse it after a while.
huh?
And pretty much diffuse it after a while. That in
Yeah.
other words, he really realizes he's just yelling at himself.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my mother was telling me, and some of her issues around men when I was coming up, didn't realize until I was a grown man, and then she would tell me certain things about her life and about my grandma and my mother's father, and that he would just get into this thing also, just wanting to argue and yell, and my grandma would just argue back, and he was a physically abusive man. And my mother was saying that as a kid, she was like, telling my grandma, you need to not say anything back to this guy, because you know what's going to happen. And so, she pretty much acted out, she said, they go back and forth, and my grandmother almost kind of like sound like a bird in a way when she's just getting really angry, like that, So she's going back, and then finally, my mother she's going, ow, 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 why don't you just, not, in other words, not play along with this guy.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's one of those programs also. And I've had relationships in the past where, I would always try to be cool, but then there's that part where their attachments are literally wanting to feed off me in some way. And I'm not giving them enough food, so they just basically have to keep going at me until I, at the time, would just like have to say something. I was very good about not physically, attacking anybody, but I would have to shut it down in a certain way and then leave the space. But again, there's, again, having to do with certain types of programming, and like you had trained, well, I guess you did train your sister-in-law and how to actually deal with this kind of aggression. The next thing for her is actually to start to focus and target his attachments without him even knowing it. Contain his attachments while, he's busy, or just contain him, really.
Right.
Kind of funny then, he probably won't know what's happening. But then, contain him. And then if you're in a space with somebody, then you can just start, see them going off or whatever. I'm going to tune into that one there that likes to say this particular phrase every time. And you start containing that one. And then the next one, you contain that one. You keep doing that, it's going to shift.
I don't know why, but when you both were talking, it made me think of there's a playbook of density, and they want you to only follow these plans in the playbook. Like if you're gonna make any choice, you gotta go by this play. You gotta make this move. And Neo Shamanism is like a whole nother playbook that's outside of how they play, and you can win. You can succeed so much easier. And so many people, they're like, every time they want to make a move or make a decision, they're always playing by the playbook of density, and it always ends up badly. And then they blame the world, they blame themselves, they blame everything.
Well, women will blame themselves more so than the man will blame himself for a problem.
Absolutely.
In most cases, that's the way it is. So it doesn't work, and then she proceeds to start flogging herself. But darn it. There was something that I had on the back of my head, and it just slipped out. Having to do with what we were actually talking about. Just in general, with even the battle of women, with women, that you have to contain, you have to contain everybody, as anyone had an obsession with, you have to contain everybody. And some of the things that certain women will do, they have even this particular woman was talking about how she doesn't like women's groups because, they just complain about men through the whole thing. But the same individual proved herself to be a part of that problem and how she deals with me and Ms. A. So, and what I'm talking about already, where, we're dealing with her in a very respectful way, so on and so forth. But for some reason, she has her sights set on me for whatever reason. And I think the reason is that, I'm doing what I do. I do what I do. Nobody really does what I do. And it works. So she's been a client for a while, and she sees it. She's got, she had this issue that she's been running around with for years, and I fixed it. So she decides that in her mind that she needs to claim me. And what, and the only thing in the way of her claiming me is Ms. A. To the point where she literally just is very disrespectful and rude. To the point where I've decided that to cut this person off. She's, she named some contraption that she uses for some kind of healing thing after me.
And said she's gonna sleep with it, and then she was gonna tell me more about what she was gonna do. And suddenly it was like a light being that helps with the session pushed her because her body flew back like almost a foot, and she stopped talking mid-sentence, and I was like, "Whoa! I think someone helped out the situation."
It's not just the two of us in the room. Yeah. We're doing these things. And whoever was there just got tired of this one because I had left to do something. And because and Ms. A was being very professional and not coming down on her, but we had, like at least 3 sessions where this kind of nonsense went on. And so we're talking about, situations where she's claiming that women don't work well together, but she's doing the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. Being, abusive to another woman who has more use in this environment than she'll ever have. Mm-hmm. But there's some delusional programming that goes on with certain individuals, certain females, where they fight with each other and they try to undermine one another. So that's where I go back and say, okay, let's start looking at each other as consciousness. See if you can respect yourself and respect other individuals as consciousness. If you run into a man and you say he's a consciousness and he proves to you that he does not deserve respect, then avoid him. The same with a woman. If she proves to you that she does not deserve respect, you can just avoid them. If you can, but containment works wonders.
I remember you taught me, like, before, whenever there would be certain women that were disrespectful to me because they wanted to be me or have the place that I have. At first it kind of bothered me because I didn't know how to handle it, but then I thought about, you know what? They don't have respect and consideration for their selves. They don't care about who they are and where they are in their journey. So they're looking at me and wanting to be me because they have no respect for themselves. So I shouldn't be angry at them. I should understand, okay, they're following a program, containment barrier,
right.
Just deal with yourself.
And too, those programs, a lot of times those women, they, not even just women, men and women, like, they'll in a sense want to be like somebody else but not want to put in the work. They just automatically want to be like, all right, I want to be on your level, but then fail to realize every step it took to get to where you are, or where Mr. Harry's at, or where I'm at, or where everyone is at. It's like you literally have to put in the work. Like, it's like pointless to waste that much energy into envy or wanting to be like something else when you can create that within yourself.
They have to be taught that. That's the thing. Because they're used to running a program, so it's like you have to come out of their program. In other words, they really have to want to change. And some, they're too locked up to even understand that there's a problem. Even though
I used to allow that envious energy growing up when I would receive it to affect me. Whereas, like, now, like you said, I find the understanding of, all right, you're running that stupid program. Not like, I get it. And just like looking at people as consciousness again has helped me tremendously through my journey. It's made everything that much more easier and more successful, I feel.
Yeah, definitely makes sense.
Whenever you said that all consciousness comes from supreme consciousness, almost like a burst, and when they burst out, no two consciousness are exactly on the same path. They're all going on their own paths, their own journeys, right? So I feel like when people are so envious of other people, or they so much want to be that person instead of themselves, it's like, it's okay to be you. Your journey is very special, very unique. Your talents are your own. You don't have to be like that person or like that. I don't need that skill. I'll never be chief. All I want to do is be myself and be useful to the Neo Shamanic purpose and keep going and figure out what my journey is going to be.
Yep.
I'm just sitting here, thoughts are like jumping out of my head and running away. Sorry about that. But just I wanted to co-sign that. I never remember what the heck I was going to say to co-sign it now.
Oh, man.
But again, it's like individuals who are not aware. So, everything, media and everything is, is very much telling, men how to be men, supposedly, and women how to be women.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's like pulled from the butt of some, demon or something that really wants to have fun with everybody.
Everybody should be Beyonce. It's like, no.
Right.
No. Why?
Yeah. And it does, of course, when, there's kids and you're preteens and so on, and they just, just basically flood them with all this nonsense. So they can become teens and young women, and they, then if they have the wherewithal, they will maybe try to change things, or they just, they may be so locked up in the program that they're just stuck there. And so I
even
yeah, go ahead.
Even like the programming of like teaching, where I feel like the school programming growing up, I always understood that I couldn't, like, it was hard for me to learn when people told me to read stuff or try to talk me through it, where I understood that I was a visual and a hands-on learner. And going back to what you said, like, everyone's journey is different, but then they don't realize that they're in the same programming, and it's like, if you don't get it, it's because it's not for you. But then they try to put themselves in that space of like, well, she has, this, and it's like, you don't fit in that box. Like, go in your own space. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as a kid, I remember, watching, TV shows and movies, and thinking that these actors had it really, really good. And it was just kind of funny because, like, a black kid in Detroit, and I'm watching something with, Clint Eastwood or whatever. That's a really cool guy. Or Sean Connery as, 007, a couple of white dudes, And at some point, even as a kid, I'd say, it's kind of ridiculous because I'm never going to be a white guy. So
Right.
so why do I want to be these guys? Because it's never going to happen. So it's kind of like, it's kind of useless for me to, to feel that way. But I still had struggles with other, from that time on. But that was an awareness to me that, I can't be this person, And also, who needs a cheap knockoff of somebody who already exists?
Right.
Yeah.
And I remember you said, then you would be a bad version of yourself and a bad version of who you're trying to be.
Yeah.
That makes so
And
much
we've seen
sense.
bad
Yeah.
versions of other people,
Oh, man. It looks like we're about to come to a close if you want to wrap it up for us.
Well, Ms. May said that it's, we've got 2 minutes left for the forum. This is the first. This is like an experiment. I'm hoping that it's that it's something that you guys would like to do like at least once a month or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I definitely enjoyed it, but that's beside the point. It's whether you all enjoy it, and and for the next one, then if you'll make the next one, just have in mind what you want to share and what you want to talk about. And you did very well with sharing Neo Shaman Nelly, which I very much appreciate. But everyone else who didn't, it's cool. You can sit and you can observe and just hear and listen. No one has to talk or anything, which it helps though for me. If I'm dealing here, I have to just keep pulling things up and try to bring up something that's interesting. But again, I just feel that I would hope, again, it wasn't supposed to be me sitting here. It's supposed to be primarily women, but I wanted to have a situation where you define for yourself what your movement is, using some of the tenets of Neo Shamanism and basically looking at each other as consciousness first.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I really was so glad that you were willing to join was I always felt like women are always looking for someone in a masculine form to respect them, to be able to hear their side of the story. Almost like there's so many guys that just won't listen won't listen at all. And just to have you here is really a privilege because you're able to listen and also give really great feedback. And I just felt that was really special. I mean, what women's forum has a balanced male in it? I mean,
Right.
She's around me all the time, so I have to take her word for that.
No, I totally agree too. Like it feels very balanced.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've been like this since I was a kid, you know, all the way from trying to protect my sisters,
Right.
but it wasn't just so much that anyway.
Because when you talk about protecting them, you don't just protect them, you empower them. Because if you're always trying to be the defender but teaching them to defend themselves, there's a balance between that. That's really
Well, it's about helping them empower themselves. That's really what it's about, you know. And so that I'm not standing here, I take your credit for you being empowered. No, it's not about that. It's about you finding your own way through through this dialogue, through these, these conversations, to actually empower yourselves and find out what you can use to empower yourself, so that it's not this situation. Well, here's another guy who's influencing the women's movement or whatever, you know. But I am sitting here as a consciousness, and not so much as a dude. But I do have that insight, so I share some of those stories. But again, it's about you empowering yourselves, literally, in a very logical way, so you don't fall into the same pit holes that a lot of women's movements that I've observed over decades fall into, you know. So anyway, I appreciate everyone. Yeah, I appreciate all.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Have a
you.
good evening or a good day.
Take care.
Bye.